The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. My name's Larry, and I'm an alcoholic. Every once in a while, I'll just be going through ordinary life and I think of something that I didn't talk about at a meeting that occurs to me. At AA meetings, I often find things that will test my serenity even within the meeting. There are some folks that have behaviors that I find irritating. The Big Book has certain traditions as well as steps. There's sort of a ritual pattern contained therein. We have table leaders or group leaders, meeting leaders, essentially for the purpose of not interjecting their own stuff, but if someone is engaging in something that violates the rules. Usually the only time I see this invoked is if there's crosstalk. The group leader, but sometimes it's left to other people in the meeting. We'll just be like, hey, this is crosstalk. We need to confine ourselves to the propriety of discussion. Also, very rarely I have seen people, group leaders or others, actually do speak up when someone gets really, really off topic. And sometimes this happens where people are like telling you all about their life in a way that really does not confine the discussion to alcoholism and what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. But I was thinking of a particular incident that I ran into, and not in my local group or anything like that, in case anyone sees this. It was actually, I was living in another state almost 8 years ago. Resentments, right? But I had this thing that bothered me, and there was a guy at a meeting that every time he was there, I felt like I couldn't talk. And the reason for that is he always wanted to talk first, and he'd always give us a lecture about we should talk about what we did to get better. Everybody talks about their drunk log. That's what he used to call it. Their drunk log, going on and on about the things they used to do. We all got a drunk log. Why the hell should we talk about it? Let's talk about what you did. Nobody ever stopped him. None of the group leaders, none of the meeting leaders, no one ever said anything, and I just didn't feel like getting into it, and maybe I should have said something. The whole essence of why the program works is you talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Now, I can't pin down, I don't think anyone can, not realistically, exactly what it is about the program that works. It works. I think the best I can conclude is it works because through hard work, you achieve the spiritual experience that alcohol and drugs were a spiritual experience artificially induced in an immediate sense, exacting a penalty. But through hard work, you achieve an actual spiritual experience, and therefore it is able to supplant the compulsion to use, not necessarily the desire, but to break, as it says in the Big Book, at some point we lost our ability to choose. By the end, I had to drink. There was a little bit of control of when or how long I might put it off, but I was going to do it again until I had the spiritual experience that purged it from me. But one of the things I've noted throughout my life in AA is that part of that is the vicarious reliving. Sometimes you tell tragic old stories and you cry. Sometimes you remember fun stuff you did when it was still fun and you laugh. And there's a lot of that in AA when it's being effective. There's a lot of laughing and crying and laughing and regret and good times and bad. And somehow or another, this gets us through it. It's unfair to bully or pressure people in AA or any group or any meeting to not talk about the way things were because you think it's a drunk log. There were a lot of really fun, hilarious, good times that I had when I was drinking. Even some of the very irresponsible stuff, let's face it, it was super fun at the time, and I enjoyed it at the time. To pretend that that doesn't exist and isn't part of the experience is to leave myself open to the avenue of it coming back. And I mean, all of the misery that I spent of a couple of years of drinking around the clock, passing out in a chair for a couple hours each 24, drinking cold water and making myself puke while holding my nose to cleanse and then doing it again, lost 60 pounds because I couldn't eat food except one Lunchable a day in between vomiting. The misery and agony of that I did not want to do but had to do, the cycle I couldn't break. That's easy enough to look back on and say, I don't want to do that again. But if I were foolish enough to believe that I was better, or I'm more stable now, or I'm happier now, so it won't happen again like that. If I were to start vicariously thinking about the good times, again, as it says in the big book, the persistent delusion of the persistent the persistent obsession of every alcoholic is that someday, somehow, some way, they will control and enjoy their using. That's the key. That part of me that is still diseased really wants to be able to drink. Now, I'm at a point, since I had my spiritual experience, where I don't have the compulsion. And the thought of drinking at this point, the idea of having that taste, everything kind of makes me sick. But of course, there are times that I miss the oblivion or the control in an immediate sense of my emotional state. There are times it would be really, really cool to be able to get drunk. I don't do that today because I don't have to. The compulsion is gone, and I know better because I know the first rule of the program, that I am powerless over alcohol. But if I were to take all those good times, those fun things, those happy moments, and shove them aside and pretend they didn't exist and only focus on that tragedy at meetings and in my life, eventually that nagging part of me would be like that obsession. You haven't done it in over 13 years. Imagine how good it would feel to drink now, at least for a while. Imagine that you're better. You're cured now. You're in a better place. You're more stable. You're not going to go back. It'll never be miserable again. You can do it in small doses occasionally like this and have this good time. Well, that's just not true. And the complete narrative that the meeting presents, the complete opportunity of what it was like, what happened, and what it is like now, has to include the good times, the bad times, how bad it got, what it was that changed it, and how wonderful things are sober, and how bad things can be sober. Because life doesn't change. You go through miserable times. You're just doing it in a way that doesn't involve alcohol. And I tell you, no miserable suffering I've ever endured was as bad as what I was doing to myself when I was trapped in the cycle of compulsion and could not stop drinking. So I was thinking of this today. Well, I've thought about it occasionally lately, of why it's so important to be doing the program the way the book describes it, to be doing the meetings the way the book describes it, to have the whole picture of it, because that's the thing that keeps me sober. Not bits and pieces of it, but the whole program by the command and guidance of my higher power. That's what keeps me alive and well and sober today. I got to remember those fun times, and I got to remember those crazy times, and I got to remember the misery of what it leads to. All of that allows me to live that, relive that, keep all of that in the context of my life experience and my drinking experience, and keep it in the full context of what inevitably happened now post, what it is like now.